All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pensive Politics with Mr. Watson. And I have a special edition of the show for you guys today. You see, my project with this channel is to bring together different strains of thought and to test their merits, to see how they're related, and to see how they can, more broadly speaking, help contribute to the American experiment. And I have this habit of going on Twitter and other places on social media and looking at the discourse there and seeing what advocates represent different strains of thought. And I saw a tweet from my guest here, Carson Wolf. I'll let him introduce himself in a second because I'm a big believer that no one can introduce you better than yourself. And I saw his commentary about drag queens. Um, and I think, given that this is Pride Month, and given that we saw something very disturbing out of Texas a few days ago, it's very good to have a discourse on this matter. And so, Carson, thank you so much for being here. And you just tell people who you are and anything you want to know about you before we get started.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for having me. I mean, I'm excited to be here. I'm Carson Wolf. I am 19 years old. I am a Texan. I'm an American. I'm a conservative Christian. I'm a nationalist. I work with groups like the American Populist Union. As you can tell, I'm pretty young, so I still have voice cracks. You got to be patient with me. But yeah, I work with groups like the American Populist Union, Upward News, just various other platforms. I've worked in the past with groups like Young Americans Against Socialism, just very involved in the conservative movement, the youth conservative movement, trying to expand the conservative cause in my generation, because I think we missed out on some of the greatest ideas and some of the greatest movement that this country's ever seen. And I think we can definitely, so that's what I'm doing, and I'm super pumped to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, what are some of those greatest ideas you've missed out on that you're trying to advocate for?
Traditional way of life. I feel like a big thing for me is I feel like men of this country, of my generation, have been robbed of what men in the past were promised. A sense of meaning. I feel like a big thing for me is I feel like, all these old conservatives, they talk about the redistribution of wealth, and like how socialists, they want to redistribute your wealth, and that's like the worst thing in the world. But what about the redistribution of meaning that's happened to young men in this country, where our sense of brotherhood, community, everything that gives us purpose, dedicating our lives to something greater than ourselves, that has been taken away, stripped of all men, and redistributed to all the other politically correct groups in society? And I think that's the biggest thing. So that's probably the thing that I think I'm trying to restore in my generation.
So you have this idea, and this is an idea that is endemic to traditionalist thought. You see this reflected in the ancient times with Aristotle, and you definitely see this reflected with thinkers like Burke as well. This idea that community, the polis, so to speak, the community, our surroundings, help us have meaning, give meaning to our lives. And virtue is not simply this self-contained process. It's a sort of external process that we participate in by interaction. And through, I don't know, the rise of left-wing ideologies or whatever, subversive ideologies, we'll say, they have
and materialists.
And materialists, right? They have taken the sort of they have seized the stage where these values, where virtue is cultivated, and they have began distributing it to different classes. And you see that as a problem. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Interesting. Correct. Interesting. Very interesting.
Do you?
Well, this is the divide, I think. I don't believe that I need other people to be a good person.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's what I always say. I say, keep your good deeds to yourself,
Well, then, but if that's the case, then what's the purpose of communal virtue? What's the purpose of going out and to interact with others as to cultivate virtue? What's the purpose of that? Is that if it's just...
I think that's where it comes to like the religious sense of like, if you only believe that like, this is the end of like of our existence, where it's just like where the physical is the end all be all, why would you keep your good deeds to yourself? Why would you believe that there's anything other than that? Why would you dedicate your life to something greater? Because then you are the greatest thing. And I think that's where a lot of more atheist sentiments coming to shape the world around us.
Yeah, I'm not. I think this is a very particular reading. I assume you're a Christian, right? I'm just studying by the cross and everything.
Yeah, I'm
And
a
by your
convert.
a convert. Okay. Well, welcome to the faith, by the way. I consider myself a Christian as well. I may
Let's
be of a
go.
different strain, but welcome to the faith. I think that having a relationship with the divine, with Jesus, is a very good thing. Even if that relationship, everyone has a different relationship with Christ. Some people have a very fervent and zealous relationship. Other folks have a more pedagogical relationship. They learn from his teachings and they still recognize his divinity, but it's more of a learning situation. And I think that's what it has been for me ever since I matured into my faith, right? I used to have this very fervent zeal about me. I would get on my knees and pray every day, and nothing wrong with that, by the way. Not mocking that. But as I have matured in my faith, I found that for me, the process of understanding and absorbing knowledge from the teachings of Christ in the Gospels has made me a better person, has made me understand things beyond the curse of materialism, which you've so rightly pointed out. But again, I believe the Christian lives for Christ. I
Yeah,
don't believe the Christian lives for the religious community. I don't believe the
100%.
Christian
I agree.
requires a priest for sanctification. I don't believe any of that.
I don't know
Uh,
about that.
well,
So
and
that's
this,
probably where
yeah,
we're gonna.
this viewpoint is very antithetical to Catholicism, right? Because Catholicism absolutely emphasizes the role. Is that
Yeah,
a rosary? That's a rosary. Look, it's
yeah.
a rosary. There's a rosary. No, it's antithetical to Catholicism. So we can get into that a little bit later because I think that's going to come up again. I just wanted to get some of the first principles out of the way first. But so what struck me was your tweet about drag queens. Um, and you said, I believe you said this. I don't have it in front of me, that drag queens are freakier than transgenders. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then I responded saying that this is not the
Yeah,
right way to go about handling these kind of issues. And you said something about all sin being degenerate and deserving condemnation. So I'm curious, can you defend your thesis to me that that drag queens are freakier? Actually, let me ask you a few quick questions. What do you mean by
let me.
freak? Yeah.
So
Please expand. Because
obviously,
Twitter,
I,
yeah,
I use crass language
yeah,
because
yeah,
it
of course.
a lot of my audience uses crass language. We tend to be a little bit more bombastic. I guess that's what makes us young people in politics.
That's a problem.
Is it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The bombast is not a problem, but when bombast dilutes the content of your message and makes it of a lower volume, of a lower quality, that's a big problem. Oh yeah, because for example, let's look at the American founding. You have Thomas Paine, one of the most bombastic of the pamphleteers of the revolution, who wrote a work that would not be considered today. It wasn't even considered back then to be an academic work. It was a work called Common Sense. And in that work, he's excoriating the king, he's attacking everybody, but he's doing so on an intellectual basis. I think American
Yeah,
political
but I
language
mean, again, I
yeah,
think that's all. I think that's all writing. I think that the more you write, the less, how should I say it, good your point becomes. The more you write, and I think the founding fathers recognized that as well when they were drafting the early Constitution. The more you try to put something into writing, the more it's going to fade away. It's ink. And I think even I think this is probably what we're going to disagree on. Even in the Bible, they realize this, the idea of God and his greatness and his glory, it can't be summed up in a book. God is so much greater than the book. Our country so much greater than a document, than ink on paper.
sure,
So I think the more
sure.
that you write in something, it becomes a little bit more
But
diluted, and you lose the ability for a reader to actually get inspired or to interpret it in their own way. And I'm not going to say that this is what I was doing. Of course, it's not. Obviously, mine was to be a little bit joking around, provoke people, be obnoxious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, upon a point you just made, you said that the more you write, the less meaning you get from something. And you cited two examples: the example of religion, God, and the example of politics. I find that the example is not fitting because both things you cited are of two different natures, right? God is transcendent. So God, the idea of God is inherently.
They're both greater than the idea of a man.
I definitely
a country and a.
I definitely wouldn't. No, I don't think politics is transcendent. And I
No,
think
no, country.
I don't think a country is transcendent either. No.
And
this, I don't think man's transcendent either. Let me explain myself. So when I say transcendent, the idea of God escapes the bound. So reality, right? Reality is primarily a system of limitations. Think about that. Gravity limits movement and governs it in a certain way, right? The water cycle limits certain bodies of water in the earth. Ecosystems are limited between the distinction of predator and prey, right? There's always a predator and there's always a prey, or else the ecosystem goes haywire and it falters. So reality is a matter of limitations. God exists outside that sphere. And since he is a limitless being, and man being a being that is bound by reality, the system of limitations, it is incredibly difficult. Yeah, you see where I'm going. It's incredibly difficult for us to understand him.
No, exactly.
But politics
I'm just saying.
native.
I think that. No, I'm saying that like a country and both God are both greater than mankind in general. That's just kind of the point I'm making. Like,
what makes a country greater? What makes a country greater than man?
It's like, the thing is, like, it is. I don't know how to explain it. You know what I mean? There's some things that you know, and like, how do you explain that God is greater than man?
Because he's of a different nature than man. A country is simple.
And so is
a country. No, a country is an extension of man.
I don't think so.
Why not?
Because a country is the culmination of man. Would you say that mankind is greater than man? I would.
Mankind, that's kind of circular. Mankind greater than man. Then amen. So we're talking about the distinction between the whole and parts of the whole, correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, right. And so just in plain language, the whole would be, I don't know, all of mankind. And parts of the whole would be individual parts of mankind. So everyone versus a few people here and there. And the problem is this is a false distinction because the whole does not exist. WHOLE doesn't exist at all. Because the moment one part of the whole deviates from the whole, it's no longer whole. It is fractured.
You're sounding like a collectivist there.
No, I'm sounding like an individual.
I'm joking. I was just joking. Bad joke. You know?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
But I think your idea of a country is definitely collectivist. And I understand. I get it. I understand there's a pill to it.
I mean, I think it's more unity than collective.
Well, unity requires common agreement, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of the idea of what I think a country should be.
And common agreement
has been for centuries. That's how nations arise in the first place.
Common agreement definitely cannot occur unless it emerges from the hearts and minds of man. So
true. I agree fully.
So a country is not greater than men.
I don't know.
That's all right.
I don't understand justification. Yeah,
we can move on. It's fine.
I might have just lost. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
No, it's all right.
I don't know how we got on that point. How did we get on that point?
No, it's all right. I'm sorry. I have a tendency. This is the philosopher in me, right? I have a tendency.
You got the Zoomer brain. You got the Zoomer ADHD brain.
I have a tendency to just keep, but it's all right.
I love it. I like it too. I like it.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. You're a nice guy as well, so I appreciate it. So the drag queens. Okay, explain to me your thoughts about drag queens, because that was the primary emphasis here. Explain to me your thoughts about drag queens and things of that sort.
Drag is, it's a pervert. I view it as a sexual perversion of men, in which it's like sort of a fetishization of the idea of femininity. It's a performative display of femininity, where it can be essentially just churned down to this sexualized thing of putting on flashy makeup, overblowing the ideas of femininity and breaking it down into sort of like a fetishization of the LGBT community.
So drag is a fetishization and an exaggeration of femininity.
By men, usually by some sort of the LGBT,
Okay.
narrative.
What if there's a straight man doing drag?
That wouldn't be drag. I mean, even if it is, they probably have something below that.
Drag by definition is just a man in woman's clothing with a woman's do-up. So what if it's a straight man doing drag?
Is that what it's used nowadays?
There have been straight men who've done drag, yeah. I mean, like,
yeah, but like, everybody likes to use the example of like when the Shakespeare days, whenever, everybody likes to use that one.
Contemporarily, I mean, like Tyler Perry, if you know Tyler Perry.
Yeah.
I mean, Medea, it's a man in drag.
Okay, but like, is that what it's used for?
So I don't think a principle is defined solely by its use. I think its use is defined by the principle, right? You have to have.
Then I'm talking about the use there. So what, like, other words?
Okay. So your objection is not against drag. Your objection is against how drag is used.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Whatever we want to define it as. But
well, I'm not trying to define it as anything. I'm just trying to get to the core of the issue here, because we have a few interesting problems of knowledge here, epistemology here. On one hand, if your argument implies that exaggerations of femininity by men, so it's a conditional argument. This is not a universal argument.
No, that's not necessarily what my problem is. My problem is.
Oh, please.
Is not the exaggeration of femininity. It's it's a sexualization. It's a fetish. It's used and performed as a performative ritual by these sexually over explicit communities.
Okay, there are gay folks that don't do drag.
Okay,
I'm one of them.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know you're gay.
Yeah. Well, I don't talk about it because it's not really important. I mean, it's really not important.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm an individualist, yeah. So
but we could, yeah.
Yeah. So there are gay men that don't do drag.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, cool.
So when you say community,
good for them. They shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I have no interest. I mean, I like being a man. It's fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it, dude.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, we have a good time.
Yeah. So your objection is that it's a fetishization.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's a reason that the leftist and the liberal LGBT community broadly uses this as sort of like a sacred ritual, as you can't criticize it as, in the same way that they do abortion, because it's so sacred to them. It's like, I'm a big believer in the fact that you should care about what your opposition cares about.
There are leftists who oppose abortion too, called the pro-life Democrats. There's about 2 million plus of them, according to the statistics, I believe, in the country.
Really?
Called pro-life Democrats, yes. Yep.
Okay.
They're a big chunk. Here's my problem. The general philosophical point here is not to defend the left. It's to simply I think one of the problems of political conversation is that people speak too much in generalities, and the generalities inform their perspective of the particulars, and they come away with something from a slightly distorted perspective, even if the content of their perspective would be correct under different circumstances. The way they arrived at it is very distorted and thus creates a distorted image. So if you have this idea,
I'd say that politics is a generalization. Politics in general, you have the discussion, the conflict. Politics is conflict. It's struggle to determine how to govern a people and how a people should be led, how a people should be and exist as a whole.
No,
that is a generalization.
Yeah, and again, this idea of politics, that it is a mechanism to decide how people should be and exist as a whole, is one that belongs to collectivist societies. It's one that belongs to this idea of the polis that Aristotle touted. It's one that belongs to people that undermine the moral authority of the individual. but it is not one that belongs to the proper definition of politics, because
Yeah, but
politics
also
is
like the ideas of like you keep talking about individualism, like in
yes,
how this is the end all be all.
it's not
Individualism.
the end. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Well, okay, well, I guess I
Yeah,
generalized there.
no, yeah, no.
But the idea of like individualism is this awesome thing. It's the exact opposite of collectivism. I think that's fundamentally false. I think that individualism gives birth to collectivism, because collectivism is this state enforced, this manufactured idea of it's an imitation of unity, of natural unity, where the state has to enforce it because because nations can't exist as these divided little fragmented sectors of society where nobody has anything in common, where the only thing we have in common is nothing. Individualism gives birth to that with hyper individualism, where
Okay.
you inspire people to
Yeah.
have their
Okay.
truth, their identity, and then nobody has
Okay.
anything in common. Nobody knows their
Uh,
neighbor anymore.
yeah. All right. So I think that we're confusing a few things here, but no, this is a critique that it's common. It's a lot of people that I respect, like Hannah Arendt. I was listening to some Hannah Arendt today. She wrote Totalitarianism, Origins of
Yeah,
Totalitarianism.
I've read her. She's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
good.
and her idea is that totalitarians, because she didn't like collectivism, but totalitarians use the sort of separate nature and loneliness of man, which Arendt believes arrives through man's relationship with labor. Interestingly enough, that's an interesting topic we can get to later. To then uses that apathy to move into society, influence it, and take it over ultimately. So she
Mhm.
believes that individualism is a threat to the safety of a society in general. But she also believes that totalitarians create a fictitious reality in which simple and that are controlled by single variables that are rhetorical demonstrations that are not necessarily true. Collectivism is a simple variable that is a rhetorical demonstration that is not necessarily true. And it has no relation to individualism. So let me explain this. What you called individualism is more properly called solipsism. And the idea of solipsism is that it is self-centeredness on stilts and steroids. It is this idea that the entire world, and this is no exaggeration, the entire world, meaning life, revolves around your assent, your will, and nothing else. It is a self-contained view of man. Man is not a part of an objective reality. He's a part of his own subjective experience, and everyone around him must abide by that. That's the solipsistic point of view. Now, since the emphasis of individualism and solipsism are both on the individual, people will, by proximity, associate and conflate the two topics together. Now, proximity ethics, I think, is one of the most dangerous mechanisms in our current politics. Because what proximity ethics does, so for example, let's say there's a man standing outside of a house that's burning, and he has a gasoline can. And someone walks up to him and says, "Hey, that house is burning. You have the gasoline can. You started the fire," without any investigation. That's proximity ethics, because what proximity ethics does is it conflates two things. It makes moral judgments on the basis of appearances and not on the basis of content. That man could have been filling up his car. He could have been doing anything else that gasoline can, but the association was made and the condemnation came swiftly.
I
Similarly,
think
people
they're right though. I think they're right though. Like
no,
we
you
can.
have to prove the man started the
Oh,
fire.
for sure. But like,
Okay,
we're still gonna detain him and hold him as a prime suspect.
well, you can question him, but no, the problem is the proximity ethics skips the process of inquiry, right? Okay, so here's how I think ethics should happen, right? Encounter, inquiry, conclusion. Encounter, inquiry. I'm spitballing. So this is encounter, inquiry, conclusion. I encounter a situation in reality, a set of conditions in reality. I inquire about their nature and
So
their
wait, just
impacts.
let's
Sorry.
define what you think individualism is, just so we can
I
get.
Yes, I believe individualism is the recognition of the moral agency of the individual in an objective reality. that also means it's recognition. So there's that's the explicit definition. Then there's implicit ones. That also means there's a recognition of the limitations of the individual. Because if I recognize that the individual is a moral agent within the confines of reality, and as I mentioned before, reality is limited, ergo, the individual as a subject of reality is also limited, that means that solipsism, I can do it all by myself and I'm the arbiter of truth, goes out the window. Because solipsism just says, nope, it is what I say it is. That's not the case. Individuals are subjects of reality. And so to make it intelligible, to see what exactly limits the individual, we don't, what the collectivist does or what the traditionalist does, they say, okay, we have this individual here limited by reality, but we're going to swallow them up into this big whole mass, again, whole versus parts. And we're going to, since the individual is limited, he needs this broader entity, this broader idea. What the individualist says is, no. Just because I exist in proximity to society and I am limited in my own power, there are things outside of society that inform how I should interact with other people. And these are what I call
and I just
the
say
laws
that,
of nature.
and I just say that mankind ultimately does the latter, or does the first, where we always look for a sense of meaning and a sense of community and where we belong.
Community
like
versus
even
collectivism.
Individuals do that.
Community versus collectivism. So I think community is inherently good. Oh well, not actually. That's not true. That's not true. I think community can be good, right? Community is not inherently good. Community is a community is a structure, and like most structures, it's neutral. Like most structures, unless the structure itself is affixed to a broader moral axiom, right? So the structure of the United States is affixed to the axiom of natural rights and individual liberty. No matter how much the traditionalists or the post-liberals want to reject that, it is. That's just what it is in the documents. People don't like that, that's fine. I get it, but it's just a historical fact, right? The community is not inherently fixed to a moral axiom, but it is fixed. Sure, yeah. It is fixed to a natural inclination for man to be sociable. This is what the natural law theorists call the sociability of man. That is our inclination to be social, to interact with each other peaceably, right? Now, Hobbes was like, man can't interact peaceably in the absence of laws. I have to constrain him and bind him for him to interact peaceably.
I don't buy that.
The natural law theorists who are not Hobbes said, no. Well, most of them said, no. Particularly Locke and Grotius and all them said, no. Man exists for want of peace because morality also exists, can only exist in such normal circumstances. And we're unfortunately, apparently we're almost out of time, but it's all right. According to this Zoom link here. But so the idea
is, back to the drag queen thing. On this point of community, I think that a lot of this is sort of a ritual of the community that's been formed in the, I even call it an LGBT community. That's what it is essentially. And I think I've talked to a lot of people who have transitioned genders. Some of my friends people I'm friends with have gone and transitioned and then transitioned back but they transitioned in the first place because the community, it pushes them to do that. It celebrates it in the same way that our society does nowadays of drag shows. It's not just it hasn't just become an LGBT thing. It's become something that's celebrated in the mainstream media. And eventually, like we can criticize it for children all we want and say like we disagree with the children. Of course we do. I mean, of course we do. But at the end of the day, if you're celebrating it for anybody, it's going to end up with children, because children are shaped by what we see and perceive, and we see somebody being celebrated in the same way that when we take our first steps as children, our mother cheers and goes, "Yay, great job." When we as children see this sort of stuff in the mainstream being celebrated, we go, "Okay, that's being celebrated. I want to be celebrated. I'm going to keep doing that so I can feel good and I can be this is usually a good human trait. It helps us keep the good stuff, the good behaviors that we're behaving, and then the bad ones, the knocking down kids' towers and whatnot, that gets thrown out the window because we're shaped. Our behaviors at the end of the day are shaped by the norms, and the norms are shaped by what is normal. So
Okay, well, I think again that's a categorically different issue because now we're talking about if children should be exposed to certain things, right? And these things may not come from a sort of broader communal effort. Again, I don't believe there's an
But I mean,
LGBTQ community.
children are exposed to everything that everybody else is exposed to. I
Sure,
mean,
no, and
look
these
at
are
how the
different.
porn industry
So,
has
so
worked.
the origin, well, pornography is another topic as well. I think it's misconstrued by a lot of people. Um, but but so the origin of this phenomenon and if the phenomenon should be observed by children are two different things, right? So the origin of the drag
I think they're the
shows,
same thing. I think that they're.
how
I mean,
categorically.
I'd say that everything, if you expose it to anybody, it's going to eventually down the line, it's going to be exposed to your children that you have.
Well, right. So the exposure and where it came from are two different things, though.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, I just personally, there's this. So, are you primarily concerned about drag because of its implications for kids, or is there something bigger? Because if we imagine a world, which is a reasonable world, which exists in the actual world, where kids do not see drag, then what?
Then good. Then we got the first step.
What's the second step?
Create a stigma around it for the rest of the people.
Create a statement.
Stigma.
A stigma. Oh, so you want to enforce what you want people not to practice drag, and you want people in society to enforce that.
Yeah, I just don't think it's a very virtuous practice.
So yeah, you were saying about how wearing drag in society should be a social stigma.
Yeah, what was I saying?
Well, you were saying that you don't think it's virtuous, per
Yeah,
se.
I don't. I don't think it's virtuous.
Mm. And so anything that's not virtuous should be prohibited.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that's not what I said. I said I think it should be a stigma around it.
Well, stigmas, the function of a stigma is to prohibit something from happening, right? It's not.
Yeah, and that's
Obviously.
the thing. I think that most unvirtuous things should have stigmas that make people have something in their minds go, hey, maybe I are the social costs of me doing this too high?
So what about drag is not virtuous? Is it the exaggeration of femininity?
I mean, I think it's even in the fact that we wouldn't let our children around it. You wouldn't let your children around drag. Why not? Because there's something unvirtuous about it.
That
It
makes no
when you
sense.
see it. I
No,
mean,
no.
how does it not make sense?
I wouldn't if I had a child in some hypothetical world, I wouldn't let my child around a tractor trailer. Does that mean tractor trailers are unvirtuous?
Wait, a what trailer?
A tractor trailer.
Why not?
I don't want them to get hit or ran over or to fall.
You don't want that. Yeah, you don't want to get them hurt.
Yes, but that doesn't make the thing unvirtuous, though.
But it does make it dangerous.
In that case, yes, that's not what you said. You said it's not virtuous. It's going to be a categorically different claim to say that.
I mean, but we can tell the difference between being near a tractor and having a
there is a difference, but
dressed up like a woman twerk on
right.
your 4-year-old.
No, well, hold on. You're assuming that happens in every instance of drag. Men dressed up like women twerking on 4-year-olds. Okay, in order for an action to be inherently unvirtuous, it has to be unvirtuous in principle. If it becomes unvirtuous by consequence of how someone uses it, we can ask ourselves, is that reflective upon the action? It's like action itself, the idea itself, or is it a distortion, right? So the idea that if someone uses Christianity to justify genocide, that is not reflective of Christianity. That is reflective of a perversion. There is nothing within whatever we want to imagine it as the code of being drag.
And I'd say in general, the practice of drag is a perversion in of itself.
Define perversion for me.
Something that takes an aspect that exists naturally and then, I guess, molds it to fit a different and I'd say this one is sexually perverted words. To fit a sexual narrative.
So perversion takes something that is natural and molds it to fit a sexual idea.
I'd say so.
Interesting. Perversion takes something that is natural and molds it to fit a sexual idea.
Or like sexual desires, or
A
like
sexual desire.
some sort of
Drag has sexual innuendos,
yeah.
but it itself is not inherently sexual. Like stripping is inherently sexual. It's not just innuendo. It is blatant overt action that is designed.
I don't like that either.
That is designed. I wouldn't imagine that you would, but that it's designed to get the men in that club aroused, just for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Okay. Drag is not that. Drag is an exaggeration that is meant to evoke a comedic
I'd say
response.
it does it of the person who's doing it.
How do you know the person who's doing it for sexual purposes?
Well, tell me what the person is doing it for.
I don't know, and neither do you. Not in their head.
No. We also don't know what somebody does, genocide for. But at the end of the day,
I have a few ideas, but again,
yeah.
I ultimately don't.
Same with me.
I ultimately don't know what was in. I don't know what was in Pol Pot's head, but I know what he said. I don't know what was in Mao Zedong's head, but I know what he said in the little red book. I know what their stated reason was for what they did.
And all I know is that these people surround themselves with children. They also surround themselves with a group that is focused on the the propagation of sexual ideology. So
what people, Carson?
The LGBT community.
There is no LGBT community, Carson. There are only individuals.
I don't agree with that. They beg to differ, and I'd say,
what?
I think
okay,
we're operating in false.
Where is this monolith?
Disagree with that.
No, we're not. It's a false to think that there's a single monolithic LGBT community. There is not. There is not. That does not exist.
So then what is Pride Month?
Pride Month is an expression of a certain kind of value. Now, again, I have my own issue.
And so is that.
I have my own issue.
Community.
But there is no LGBT. There is no LGBT community though.
See, and I think we're just operating on different ideas of what's,
But one of us is right, and one of us is wrong.
I'd say I'm right.
I don't think so, my friend. So, like, why do you think there's an LGBT community?
Because I've seen it, and they've seen it.
You've seen it? Okay, what does it look like? I'm curious.
I mean, like in high school nowadays, we have LGBT clubs. We have, in every school, there's a group of people that is a coalition together.
Coalitions exist. Coalitions definitely exist.
Yeah. I mean, unofficial coalitions, and that's what I'd say a community is.
But they're not this broader general community, right? Because
I'd say the conservative community exists.
It's much easier. What does that mean? Do you mean the national conservatives and the post-liberals like Vermeule and Deneen? They're not in community with the more classical, liberally based conservatives. They're actually intentional.
Yeah, but I'd say that that the conservative movement as a whole operates as a community.
No, it does not. It is actually fractured this way, that way, and all other ways.
For sure.
No, it does not.
And so is the LGBT community, I guess. If you just want to call it something else, we can do that.
The fact that no one on the basis of their sexual orientation is in an assigned group. What do you mean? Okay, no one on the basis of their sexual, just because you're gay does not mean you're a part of something else. All it means is that you like,
and that's why I separate. I mean, you can be, gay and not be a part of the LGBT, or you can be homosexual and not be a part of the LGBT community, because like there's a difference between being homosexual and being gay.
What's the difference?
I'd say there's a difference.
What's the difference?
I'd say that gay it makes it a part of their identity.
What?
Yeah. I'd say being gay makes homosexuality a part of their identity, and everything they do and or a lot of what they do in expressing themselves has to do with an outward expression of their sexuality.
How does the term gay imply that?
Like I'm heterosexual. I wouldn't say I'm like straight, one of those guys who always is
Why
trying
not?
to, or I mean, like, you know what I mean? I'm not somebody who expresses it all the time. I don't make it a part of my identity.
But the term straight doesn't imply that you express all the time.
I just say that my interpretation of it does. I'd say it's easier to separate people as from the group in which many people have
I
been
think your
lumped into.
interpretation is incredibly flawed. Let me
Whatever.
let me explain why. No, and this is not. I'm not trying to pick on you. I think that you have.
I mean, I can lump in all the homosexuals with gays in the LGBT community if you want me to, but I don't.
No, I don't. I would rather you not think in such broad terms when it comes to essential meaning. This is a problem. Okay, so straight and gay are just colloquial terms for the term homosexual. They don't imply anything else but the term with the social identity, and as in with the character of people who said it. So that's just one thing. And all colloquial terms are the same way, right? That's fire, bro. Okay, they're not actually talking about, being wielders of fire. They're just talking about, it's cool, I guess. I don't know. These people with their strange language these days, I don't understand any of it. But what you're talking about here is a problem of categories, a problem of heuristics, right? So categories are heuristics. Heuristics are these things that help us understand certain concepts better. So, for example, you have this book here. This is one of the best books I think anyone could read, Walden by Henry David Thoreau. This book, yeah, it's beautiful. This book obviously belongs to the category of a book. Now, if you want to get even more specific, it belongs to the category of a narrative book, because not all books are the same, obviously. If you want to get even more specific, it belongs to the category of a transcendentalist literature book. So the thing is, this book can go into many different categories just on the basis of its form, the fact that it's a book. But when we actually consider what this book is in essence and what it belongs to, it really only fits one category. Just like this shirt here, you could say it's a shirt, or you could say more properly, it's a sweater. There's distinctions that are important to understanding meaning. When you say
the thing is with that, when it's separated from like the norms of society, when it's normal to read a book, you go into those those specifics. You go into like, oh, this is a political literature novel. You go into, oh, this is a political literature novel by Joseph J. Master. You go into like these specifics of it because it's so common to see it. You have to break it down even more.
It's not commonality.
I mean like that's why we do. That's what nowadays, if you say, like people just talk about books like they're books instead of talking about the specifics of them necessarily. And they do this in movies as well. You're seeing a Marvel movie, or you're seeing a superhero, like stuff like that. You know what I mean?
And in common conversation, we're not trying to make value judgments. That's fine. If I say, hey, did you see the new Batman movie? I don't have to say, did you see Batman 1989 starring Jack Nicholson? I don't have to say that because it's just common conversation. That was a great movie, by the way. And 19 was a great movie. But I don't have to say, I don't be too specific. But you're making a value judgment about a group of people or a status condition of people as a community, and that requires more specification because of the nature of the claim.
I don't make the assessment of it. They choose their own identity, and then.
Well, but you just did though. You just said that the LGBT community are a community, and they're pushing things that are dangerous. You just said that. Okay, that term suffers because it's an uninformed heuristic. So we begin our search for knowledge by, I think, with many things, primarily being intuition, right? So let's say, for example, that I want to learn more about the nature of plastic water bottles. Well, my intuition already tells me several things about plastic water bottles. They tend to have a very, for lack of a better term, it's going to be circular, but it'll be okay, plastic feeling. They tend to be lightweight depending on how much water is contained. They tend to have, there's problems with sometimes chemical bleed over in certain varieties of plastic water, but there's all kind of things that my intuition more so my intuition would be something that about its weight and how much it can hold, things like that. But if I want to actually study its structure, its atomic structure, how it's processed, how it's made, I have to go out and seek things that are beyond me. We can't just make our own assessments of phenomena that exist in the world and impose our assessments upon those phenomena without asking a lot of important questions. And what you're doing when you say LGBT community is you're doing that. You have this idea of this collective mass, this huge group of people in your head, and you're transposing that upon the activists you see, and you're assuming that to be a part of a broader, cohesive effort. And that's just not how the reality of it plays out. Individuals are individuals, and if a community does exist, it exists because they have desire to come in concert for it on the basis of their individualism, on the basis of their individual values. Nothing about being gay inherently compels me to join a community. I think about being Black compels me to join a community. And I would hope nothing about being white compels you to join a community either. Or maybe it does.
I don't know. I mean, I think now with the I think it comes back to the idea that you've kind of stripped everybody of a sense of meaning and of dedication of their life to something greater. And now we resort to what we are at our basest foundations of race, who we like to have sex with, and like these things we consume. I think society's been structured around a lot of that. You have these fandom communities now based on the common celebration of that. So I'd say that as you remove sort of the more transcendent, the word that you used earlier, aspects of one's nature and of their identity, you start to devolve human society into these groups of sex and race and all of those things, the basis foundations of humanity.
Well, man definitely is not transcendent, so I definitely would not use that word to describe it.
No, but you know what I meant. Like,
yes, I think so. Yes. What's wrong with fandom communities?
I mean, nothing inherently, I guess, but I just say it.
You just insinuate that they were part of this stripping of value. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think it's sort of filling a void of what God used to exist in people. This communal effort to worship something. I feel like a lot of the fandom is sort of a worship of a like something that we consume, I'd say.
So for those who don't know, a fandom is a community.
And look, I'm a comic book nerd myself. I grew up on those.
A fandom is a community that is situated around a particular movie, TV show, comic book, things of that sort. So there's the Batman fandom, there's the Avatar: Last Airbender fandom, which I'm a part of. There's all kind of different fandoms.
Right? Oh yeah, I mean it's great. Yeah. I mean, look, I think they serve. I think some of the purposes. I was talking about it with one of my friends. I'm a big fan of.
Man, you remind me of someone when you do all that. You remind me of someone, and I think you know who you remind me of when you do all of this. You remind me of someone. You remind me of someone. Who else does this? Who else does that?
Donald Trump?
No, well, he does, yeah. Yeah, that's not who though.
Tell me who it is.
I can't say. They'll come after me, but they'll come after me, so I can't say it. But no, and that's not a bad thing. I'm just.
Well, you're leaving me on a cliffhanger now.
You remind me of Mr. Fuentes when you do that.
Okay. I think I'm very different.
You are much different. You are in a good way. You're much different. No. Yeah, I would never.
But I mean, I'm a huge fan of comic book movies and like all those. I grew up on those. Me and my friend were talking about it earlier. I mean, kids need these, especially nowadays where we have these divorce rates, where kids are growing up without fathers. I'm one of them. We look to somebody as a role model. We don't have a lot of great male role models nowadays. So I think that comic books are great. It's just, I think some of the aspects of it can go too far when it's in. And
I agree with that. So fandoms are not inherently bad then.
Yeah.
And they're not inherently trying to. They can fill a void, but that's not necessarily their goal. You can just be a part of a fandom and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you
But they
can
also
still,
bring good things with the, again, for kids who need role models.
right, right. They can do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I just don't think that this idea of grouping everyone together in the base on a community on the basis of an arbitrary characteristic is wise, because
I think
community
it
work.
depends on what the community represents. On
No, no. The nature of
I mean,
community.
look, I'd say that the I'd say that a superhero community is they serve something different than a community based on propagation of
Right,
sex. Would you
right.
like? I'd say
No, 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 no.
I think
I'm not making a judgment about communities in general. What I'm saying is saying something is a community on the basis of something that is arbitrary does not follow. So if I say I'm part of a Black community on the basis of my skin color, that does not follow, because melanin content says nothing about my values as a person. And community is largely a reflection of someone's willingness to enter into a system or a cooperative that reflects their values, unless they've been
and
forced there,
I'd say
which is
that
a
it
different
depends
topic.
on. I think that depends on what is tethering those people who you will lump in the community of sorts. What's tethering them to those outside of it? And I'd say in the LGBT community, quote unquote. I know you don't like that word, but I'd
This
say there's
doesn't
not a lot.
exist. Doesn't
Okay,
exist.
but like, just humor me for a second.
Okay.
We can use a different word if you want. But
Yeah, cool.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it exists. I mean, it's not that I want to be picky about semantics, it's that these words mean something. Because when you say community and you're grouping people together on the basis of a community on a shallow idea, like their sexuality, you can lump anyone else who may in fact have nothing to do with that in that basis as well. And then there's also another question. If the basis for your classification
I mean, I don't think that'd be
it,
very, I think that, like, if we're gonna, uh, again, I don't think that's very Christ-like if somebody was going to do that, but I don't think that's based on
no, it's not
identifying them as a
Christ-like.
community.
Christ was all
I don't
about
think that's based on. I don't think that's based on identifying them as community. Like,
so
I think people choose to be a part of the
what
community. I don't think I choose.
exactly that's my point. People choose. So you can't
Yeah,
just say there's an LGBT community because there's a bunch of gay activists out there.
and that's why when I identified the LGBT community, I did not lump you in there who happen to be gay.
Right, that's right.
Because you
But
did not
I'm trying.
you did
I'm
not
trying to.
say you're.
Is
I
maybe
don't
there's a better
think.
term, right? It's better term. Maybe maybe you could say like the activist class, because there is a class of activists, and that has a different set of values and implications than the LGBT community does.
How about just broadly the exotic sex groups?
I mean, there are straight folks that do exotic sex too, man. I mean, yeah, go to Las Vegas.
Yeah, and
All right.
let's lump those guys in there as well, because they got to go too.
Oh man. Oh god. Okay.
I just think I think our society could be a lot better if we just stopped with all the openness about sex. I think sex has gone too far right now. I think that's because of just we have nothing else. We have nothing else going for us. And then I think men have been just like essentially what it means to be a man has been broken down to, you like to get drunk, you like to go to parties, you like to hook up with girls. And I think if you break people down to just like that, you fundamentally destroy them and pacify them from ever being great again, and being a part of anything greater. And I'd say that's why we go down to these meaningless sexual communities. You know what I mean?
It was kind of all over the place. So
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the way my brain works.
No, no, it's fine. It's fine. It shows dynamism on your part, so that's not a bad thing. So there's a few issues in the thing you just mentioned. Number one, there's an issue of the condition of males in society. Then there's an issue of the over-sexualization of society. And then there's the broader theme that you try that to, which is the deterioration of values in society, which you believe, going back to our initial thesis, drag queens are a part of, or example of.
Yeah.
Okay. I do believe that there is a focus on materialism that is not healthy, and that focus manifests in many ways. It manifests in sexual way as well. I agree with that. Having said that, men and women have been having sex and talking about it for a very long time.
Yeah, no, nobody questions that, but
I don't
know
think
what
that the advent of sex, or the more openness about sex rather, has anything to do with the essential cause of the problem you point out.
I disagree, and I'd say it it depends on
If anything, it's a
what
symptom.
comes first, the chicken or the egg.
If anything, it's a symptom. If anything, it's maybe a symptom. Maybe.
Yeah, no, and I'd agree with that. I'd say
okay.
It's a symptom as well.
If anything, it's a symptom. Then again, when you say openness about sex, what do you mean? Do you mean people out in public talking about their sexual escapades? Do you mean groups of friends talking about what girls they banged that night? I mean, what do you mean? There's many ways that can go. And
I'd just say the centering of social interactions around sex. I'd say even look at the modern fraternity. What is the purpose the modern fraternity is designed to do? I mean, what is even
it's collectivism?
Yeah,
it's collectivism. It's this false idea of brotherhood or sisterhood.
But I think I'd say that I don't know if collectivism is always bad. I think it serves the same thing in community, where it it can serve a greater purpose. Would you say Christianity? The idea of Christianity, the Christian people, people who want to be more Christ-like as a collective. Would you say that's bad? I mean, I wouldn't say so. But the thing is, back to the point I was making, like the idea of a modern fraternity.
Yeah.
What does that purpose serve nowadays? Where it's just why do people join a fraternity? So it's a lot of the time nowadays it's so they can get laid easier, so they can go to these parties where they can meet girls, hook up.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's sort of a symptom of the centering of sex around society. We used to have these communities, these groups of people where there would be brotherhood. There would be people who devoted a part of themselves to a unity of these men who they viewed as brothers, as sort of an extension of themselves, in the same way they would view their family. And now it's just to get laid.
So again, I think the sex is a vehicle for a broader theme. The sex itself is not the bad thing. If you just had some random guy wanting to go out there and have consensual sex with females, that's not inherently a bad thing, depending on the context that takes place in. Is he having random hookups with people who he doesn't want to build a long-lasting relationship or long-lasting connection with? Okay, that's probably a bad thing. But is he?
That's what I'm saying.
Is he building?
Look, I love young people getting married young. That's awesome.
But no, but is he
somebody that they?
But is he building? If he's building friendships between those females that he happens to engage with, and he cares about them beyond a sexual context, even if that context is not necessarily romantic, I don't see the societal issue. Perhaps there's a spiritual issue. I don't. That's a different conversation.
100%.
That's a different conversation. But the societal issue, I don't see it.
And I mean, I don't think we can view the obligations and the effects of the spirit separate from that of the society, because again, you're an individualist. You believe that every person is determined by what happens. It says the time left again.
Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever. Yeah, it's fine.
All right. But I think we should be concerned about the spiritual effects for everybody, whether they're Christian or not.
Yeah. Well, look, Carson, this has been an interesting conversation. This is probably, we've gone over an hour. This is probably a good place to stop it.
Okay.
I think I take away from this conversation that you see a broader deterioration of norms in society and culture and you believe that's going towards a bad place. And you see drag queens as a part of that.
It's already got us to a bad place.
I don't believe that drag queens have anything inherently to do with the deterioration of values in society. I think drag itself is relatively inoffensive and harmless. I think whenever children are exposed to exploitative concepts in any form, or rather concepts that could be used to exploit their ignorance, that's a bad thing. I don't care if it's drag. I don't care if it's, taking them to a political rally. I don't care. Children ought to be shielded from certain things, and they ought to be taught other things like how to understand the natural world, mathematics, science, or reading. And so I don't see drag as the particular issue, but we will
I'd
maybe
say it's a
have
symptom
to.
of it then. Would you say that?
No, no, not at all.
But I mean, but
drag
you
is
don't think there's anything like inherently wrong with it?
drag. No, it's
Like, or
tasteless.
no, of what it's used for now.
Again, how a tool is used does not say anything about its essential nature, right? If
But
a
just, do
hammer,
you think that the modern use of it is wrong?
what modern use? There are drag queens that perform in all
The one we've
adult
been
18
talking about.
plus.
The one we've been talking about. The one that we saw in Dallas.
Yeah, that's not wide. That's not wide. That's not the widespread practice of drag. The
And I
widespread
disagree.
practice
I'd say being a young person,
so you're
we have
telling
that
me,
on my conservative college campus. We have one of those every single week.
okay, aren't people on your campus over 18?
Yeah,
Okay, then what's the issue?
I'd say there's a huge issue.
You're
You're surrounding people. I mean, what's the
no.
difference with what's the problem with indoctrination of children in college campuses? What's the problem of spreading critical race theory on college campuses? What's the problem with exposing people to essentially just indoctrinating people, spreading propaganda? What's the problem with fake news if it's consenting people? It's like there's still something moral wrong with it, whether we're above a certain age limit or not.
These are categorically different issues, though. A drag performer coming to campus at an event that you can elect to go to or not is very different than your professor who controls your grade trying to scarf down Marxist nonsense down your throat.
Yeah, but the thing is still forced onto your campus. And I would say like there is something inherent. Well, so like
no.
tell me, do you have kids?
No. How old am I?
Well, so then this is
no. How old
how
am
old are you? How old are you?
Guess.
I'm
gonna cry.
26, 27.
Oh, you got very close. That's very nice. I'm happy. I'm 22 actually.
Oh, okay.
I just got out of college a few months ago. Yeah.
No way. You look so much older than me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. You want to look older.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to look older.
No, you don't.
I got a baby face. It's like, it's horrible.
And you should be very happy. You should be very happy you do.
Nobody ever takes me seriously.
I hear that too often as well from people who have baby faces. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I just want to be taken seriously. I want to be a real boy.
I take you seriously, Carson.
Thanks, dude. Same right at you.
And I'm before we close off here, because we gotta go. I'm leaving this as an open invitation. Anytime you want to reach out and discuss anything, you want to come on the channel or whatever, please feel free to discuss it with me or come on the channel, DM me or whatever, email me. I want us to continue the dialogue because the clash of these ideas, the more voluntaristic, contractual idea that I represent, and the more traditional, norms-based idea you represent, it doesn't end here. The tension does not end here. And I think that conservatism, which I'm interested in preserving, I know that you are, even though we have different factions within it, can benefit from this conversation. It's been happening for many decades, and it can continually benefit from it. So take this as an invitation.
Likewise.
Yeah, but I'll just say there's a difference between a performance you can elect to go to and a professor who is coercing you into believing something. And also,
and I would say that,
yeah,
like as somebody who wants to have kids, somebody who wants to have a family and whatnot, I'd say that if I saw, if I had my child at that event that was going on in Dallas and I saw
that's different. It's not on college campus.
I saw a drag queen dancing on my child. I'd want to.
It's
like,
not okay.
There's just like there's something within us that's like we know that's wrong. We know it's wrong, but we've been taught by like these societal norms and like tolerance and whatnot that we can't say anything.
No, most parents wouldn't tolerate that. Even most left-leaning parents wouldn't tolerate that.
Exactly. And that's
There
what I'm
is,
saying. I think that there's something inherently wrong about it because we
yes,
have this, we have something in us that we know it's wrong.
there's something wrong about sexually exploiting children. There's nothing inherently wrong about drag, though. Drag does not inherently
I mean, what
exploit
if you
children.
saw, what if,
I would
what
have
if
the
you
same
saw
reaction.
your
If a,
16-year-old?
huh?
What if it's a 16-year-old who's has a,
What do you?
drag queen dance twerking on them or like strip, doing that sort of thing?
I think 16 is personally still a little bit too young for that kind of stuff. Although in many states in the United States, 16 is the quote unquote age of consent or whatever. And in some states, 16-year-olds can get emancipated. I
And I'd
mean,
say I don't think that consent is the only.
there's
I don't think that
worlds
consent is the only way to judge morality.
there's worlds of well, it's not the only way to judge tastes, right? Morality has to do with respecting what we already have as individuals, our rights, our ability to live. Tastes are a different category, which are important, by the way. Some tastes are very good safeguards against bad ideas. Others are just, but taste should never be what informs our morality. Our morality should inform our taste, in my opinion. But again, I wouldn't, if I had a 16-year-old child, I wouldn't want them at the damn gay bar getting twerked on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's appropriate. But but again, there's nothing inherent about drag that exploits children. That's just the truth.
And I'd say that I agree with the idea that there's nothing inherently, but I think it's very suspicious that a lot of these events surround themselves with children.
Not only a small handful. Drag has been going on for a longer time than this weird culture moment has.
But this is a weird culture moment that we're in right now, and this is what's happening in the current state.
But the moment doesn't
we're designed to
define.
solve the problems of the past.
The local does not define the universal. The universal informs the local. You're mixing up the local with the universal. You're mixing up how drag is being used with a broader idea of drag, when in all reality, how it's being used around children is exploitative and wrong, and it's not reflective of even most drag performers.
But so does that mean we should not address what's going on at the local?
No, I didn't say that.
And I'm saying I want to address what's going on at the local.
Let's do it with the universal.
And what's your solution to it?
Don't take kids to environments like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. What are you going to do when the society? What are you going to do when the society's teaching people to do that?
Society has taught a lot of things for a very long time. They can teach whatever they want to teach. You have an imperative as a parent to protect your children.
100%. So you're talking about obligation and duty and responsibility.
Obligation and duty, absolutely. Yes, those things matter.
I 100% agree, and that's what I want. I want people to realize. That's so it sounds like we have the same end goal with that.
I'll have to leave it there. But Carson,
good.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Everyone
Thank
else, stay heads up, everybody. Bye.